Hello, and welcome to the EDM Council and Security webinar titled Innovate Safely in Multicloud with the CDMC Framework for Data Security, Privacy, and Governance. I welcome Mike Meriton, co-founder and COO of the EDM Council.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone to an exciting EDM webinar today. Thank you for taking time from your schedule to join us. So why are we all here? As more companies are shifting into a hyperscale multi-cloud environment, privacy, security, data governance teams are working hard to mitigate risk and continue meeting compliance requirements. The EDM Council's newly launched Cloud Data Management capabilities, otherwise known by the acronym CDMC framework, can help streamline the approach organizations take. Companies, depending on their resources and program maturity, will have to start taking steps forward in operationalizing a holistic cloud program that implements data risk controls and opens up new business opportunities that cloud now permits all firms to achieve. So with no further ado, let's dive into this webinar, and let me go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. First, I'd like to introduce Norm Feldheim. Norm is a former CIO from Illumina and also Qualcomm. So welcome, Norm, to today's panel discussion. Good to have you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Awesome. Next, I'd like to introduce Amit Bhardwaj. He is the Chief Information Security Officer, or CHISO, at Lumentum. So welcome, Amit. Good to have you.
Thanks, Mike.
Next, Oleg Aspis, who is the Managing Director of the Chief Data Officer Office at TIAA. So Oleg, wonderful to have you here as well. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
And of course, I'd like to welcome Srinivas Avasarala, who's with Security, our sponsor for today's discussion. So Srinivas, great to have you and the support of the security team. So welcome to all of our panelists for today. So let's go ahead and dive into essentially our first major topic, which is there are challenges that companies face when adopting cloud. What are some of the basics or the main ones companies now are looking to tackle? And how do you handle this multi-cloud environment? A lot of opportunity, but also a lot of risk. So to kick off the discussion, why don't we start first with Oleg? Oleg, what's your take?
So there's a lot of interesting dynamics when it comes to cloud. Majority of the companies out there don't just adopt cloud in one path. A lot of us start to use a lot of SaaS-based offerings, right? Which majority of them are hosted and managed through cloud infrastructure, as well as private cloud infrastructure. And what's been happening across the industry is very few companies are able to just use exclusively one cloud provider and starting to build hybrid cloud infrastructures in order to be able to really scale and take advantage of the latest set of capabilities that cloud really offers and gives you advantage on. Additionally, your current obligations, whether it's privacy or data management, data governance, do not go away with your existing assets because unless you're a startup and starting off in the cloud, it's always a transition, and you're not taking your multi-data center approach, right, to hundreds and thousands of servers and shifting the entirety of those capabilities to the cloud overnight. So you have to manage both sides of the equation in not neglecting your current assets. At the same time, cloud brings you a lot of privacy challenges, specifically depending on how you're setting up your cloud infrastructure. If you're a US-only company and you want to keep everything within the borders of the United States, you need to make sure that you choose cloud providers that offer you availability zones within those regions. And any other aspects associated with privacy laws or regulations are applicable to the cloud, just like they're applicable for your current assets. So there's a lot of interesting challenges. But at the same time, a lot of benefit, right? The elasticity, the scalability of the cloud is definitely by far is a lot more elastic than what we traditionally experience in our legacy data centers. So there's definitely pros and cons to the equation, but from a governance perspective and regulatory management and other aspects, it definitely brings a whole slew of additional challenges than we traditionally faced within the walls of our infrastructure.
Oleg, thank you for framing that out. And I like the way you're sort of contrasting the challenges and managing those as well as the opportunities. So there's some sound thinking that has to go into this process. Norm, would you like to add to this discussion?
Sure. Oleg nailed it. You know, he outlined a lot of it. These are all things that we tried to do as an IT organization, security organizations at both companies I was at. But in spite of all our best efforts, we also had engineers and other employees that were going off on their own and signing up for hybrid cloud environments, multiple cloud environments, using SaaS applications that we didn't always sanction or know about. And we had to go then discover and find all those data sets that were out in the cloud that our employees, sometimes told us about, often didn't, when they went and signed up with a license and started paying money and started using it.
Yep. Norm, thanks for framing that. Almost in some of the earlier days, it was the Wild West, and some of it not intended. People not realizing when they were clicking and signing to certain applications that it's no longer in your data center on-prem. You're actually working with a public cloud operating underneath the hood. So
a lot of them just, they liked the idea of going into the cloud. They didn't have to deal with IT. So there was and the vendors were pitching it. Hey, you don't have to deal with IT. Come to us.
Just a little challenge called data privacy or data security. And with all the new laws, you used to think that it was only the highly regulated companies like banks and pharma companies and life science or medical health information. But hey, you look at GDPR or CCPA or any of these data privacy regulations, and most countries today are passing some very serious legislation around this. All companies need to now worry about data privacy. This isn't limited just to your local bank or something like that. Everyone needs to worry about it. So Amit, you're in the middle of these issues, data security and more. Do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I'm just like, our challenges are not unique compared to some of the other organizations. I think, when you look at a third-party risk, right, as to and especially around SaaS and cloud providers, you have the big boxes, right, like in the Amazons and the Azures of the world, but then you have a lot of SaaS applications which rely on a lot of other third parties that do business, with them, right? So like what is the level of depth the organizations need to go to sort of continue to manage and protect their data? And cloud brings that visibility into the mix of it, right? To say, hey, how do you protect and how do you continue to have control over your data when a lot of these layers of vendors and third parties are actually within your organization?
Understood. So Ahmed, great points. And I think every one of you so far have been pointing to the opportunity as well as the risks that you have to manage. So Srinivas, I'm going to move forward and have you maybe cover this idea of those two challenges interplaying with each other. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. So, cloud is no more just a efficient data storage solution now, right? So a cloud as a platform is generating, so much data. And then if you look at the vendors, the cloud providers, they're giving us an extremely rich set of managed services. So you can innovate so rapidly, leverage all of that data and, find insights, drive business outcomes. So, all great set of opportunities that the other panelists have indicated. The other thing is cloud actually, all of these services in the cloud let you share data so easily, right? So when you contrast with, how data is on premises, if you want to share data across teams, suppliers, third parties, it makes it so easy to do that today. And for good reasons, right? If you looked at Gartner's recent survey on CDOs, they have said that promoting data sharing, breaking down data silos is linked very highly to high performing analytics teams. So they have a huge set of opportunities. But on the flip side, the same set of rich feature sets and managed services also bring like new security configurations, new security settings to deal with, right? So that's a huge challenge. Similarly, on the privacy front, right? So you're always worrying about data privacy violations. These are holding you back from taking advantage of those opportunities. Even the enforcement activity from regulatory bodies has really gone up, right? In the last few years, it's gone significantly up. And as an industry, we haven't had a common framework, so to say, that can help enterprises say, I can use this to assess, how I'm doing against this list of data obligations, right? And that's where perhaps CDMC comes in, right? And Mike, you've played a big role there. Maybe you could explain, how it came about, right? CDMC and what exactly it provides.
No, and Srinivas, thank you. And I'd love to tell you it was just me and a couple of people at the council sat down and decided to build a framework. The story behind this is actually really interesting, and I'll just share with our audience how did this all start, and how did this working group get formed, and where are we today? So I think, as everyone just mentioned, between the comments from Norm, from Amit, from Oleg, and Srinivas, from yourself, here are those challenges. Data risk and controls, everyone needs to worry about that across all industries based on all the new data privacy laws that are enacted throughout the world. The second thing that sort of compounds this is 93% of firms use 2 or more cloud providers. So that would be like Azure and Google Cloud or GCP or AWS and IBM. This creates an order of complexity now, which is how do you implement a control framework across multiple cloud offerings and it's still not inhibit your ability to drive your business forward, because you do want to tap the power of the cloud, but do that in a responsible way. So we were approached by several members in one of the major cloud companies in March of 2020, which is almost exactly 2 years ago, with this sort of intractable problem. How do we do this? And a couple of objectives came up. Number one, we would want a framework built that would define consistent best practices for a hybrid cloud world. Number two, very importantly, align key cloud data controls to meet regulatory obligations, especially for sensitive data. And then number three, have a framework that in turn would help accelerate cloud adoption, because it would set essentially a playbook for everyone involved on here are the things we need to do to set up our multi-cloud environment with the right controls to allow us to scale forward the environment. So we decided, the council, since we had done quite a bit of work on frameworks for core data management, and many of you may have heard of the framework DCAM, which is the Data Management Capability Assessment Model. Believe it or not, 62% of our members worldwide are now using DCAM, including regulators like the Fed and the SEC and others throughout the world, for managing their businesses and teaching their teams. But what's really important, they wanted this environment of DCAM now to be extended into the world of cloud and public cloud and multi-cloud. So we said, hey, if we get 10 companies involved, we'll get going. And to our surprise, everything sort of happened at the same time. Like all firms, we were worried at the beginning of the pandemic, what would happen, but it created an environment where everyone had pressure to do something about this. And we had 100 companies join the effort. And you'll see on the left just some of the logos. We couldn't get them all onto this page, of companies that are leaders. Quite a few, frankly, in the financial markets were involved, global institutions, and some of the major consultancy firms that you'll recognize. You'll see one column over, the top 4 public cloud companies in revenue worldwide. In order, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and IBM each put 6 to 10 engineers to work on this. And other companies that many of you may do business with or recognize, Snowflake, Calibra, Informatica, and privacy firms like Privitar, and certainly the team from security. Srinivas, you and your team were involved. And then while we were building this framework of controls and guidance, we were then briefing regulators along the way to invite their opinions and their support for this. And of course, coming up with materials like training courses and so forth, and making the first delivery of the financial markets, but designing this for all markets and all companies that need to protect sensitive data. So we released this a year and a half later. And in fact, this is the bullseye of the work, which is 14 controls for protecting sensitive data in a cloud and multi-cloud environment. And you'll see on the inside of this chart, there's actually 6 components. First, governance and accountability. Everything in the cloud needs to have a defined data owner and data domains. Everything must be cataloged and classified, the second component. Everything has to, once the catalog, then it sets up your accessibility and your usage, your protection, and so forth. And each of these controls now are automations that cloud companies and individual firms are building into their frameworks to protect all forms of sensitive data. In fact, hard to read on the screen, but the top right are all the different definitions of sensitive data that GDPR classifies for the European Union, CCPA has, and then across the industry, including things like personal health information or PHI and more. So this set the core landscape and the controls that are needed. And beyond this is 165 pages of guidance. Now, for our audience, and before we move on to the panel questions now, this framework is a free framework available to all industry. And we'll be putting into the chat box here the link so you can download this and reference it yourself. You just spend a minute to register it so we can give you any of the updates, but you're entitled to use this within your firm without any obligation to be members or to pay any fees. It's a service to industry overall. Now, today you'll see these yellow stars, and we're going to be focusing in on the yellow stars you see on this chart. These are the really specific controls this panel is going to focus in on, but we certainly encourage you to read the framework after the webinar, and you'll learn more about all of this guidance that came together. So with no further ado, back to the panel discussion, and the very first core of those controls is around the area of cataloging. So when you think about this multi-cloud environment and the area of cataloging, Oleg, do you want to start first? What are the things that, as you're looking at all this guidance and the work you've done, what would you share with the audience around this topic of cataloging?
Yeah, so the first thing first, as many of you know, the concept of cataloging has been around for many, many years. Traditionally, it's been in the context of data governance, right? But as all of the privacy laws and the efficiency, as well as context needs and risk reduction, right, as well as compliance have evolved, it made the data catalogs a lot more important from a day-to-day perspective. One of the constant themes that we see across data is growing at X amount of every year. How do you not only satisfy your regulatory obligations, but be able to really create a universal library of all of the data assets that you have and context behind them? So it's not a matter of, oh, I just have this data element. Is how do you create really a uniform method to be able to have all of your consumers consume data from a consistent methodology? So catalogs are super critical. But one of the challenges is from the old days when I started in the industry, and I'm not going to mention how old I am, who populated the catalogs? The catalogs were populated heavily through Excel spreadsheets and other methods by data stewards, right? And data analysts, et cetera. But it wasn't a scalable form as data started to grow across multiple systems, et cetera. So modern data cataloging capability is becoming more and more critical to be able to satisfy all of the swim lanes that I mentioned in the beginning. And in order to be able to scale, the challenge is not every catalog platform works against every platform that you might have or want to consume. And as new hybrid and other cloud contexts, as well as SaaS offerings come to the market, you need to make sure that you have a platform and a catalog that's able to natively tap into all those data sources, assist with the discovery in order to build up that catalog. So catalog is becoming super critical because at some point, a lot of the companies that are using the brute force human methods are going to go over the peak because they can't scale and they lose a lot of business opportunities along the way.
Yeah, Oleg, great points for our audience. In a multi-cloud environment, you may not be able to pull off having one catalog for everything. So it's raising this issue of catalog interoperability, in fact, which is a major section inside of the CDMC framework and debated hotly in the work groups over a year and a half that the work went into this. So you raise really important points. Norm, do you want to carry on this topic of cataloging? It's vital, but there are issues, right?
Yeah, and we fell into that trap that Oleg talks about, and you were just talking about. We went all in, early on with Amazon and started using Amazon's proprietary tools for cataloging and just managing the data we had out there. And then, engineers and other employees started using Google, started using Azure. We still had SaaS applications that were running in other cloud environments.